Mr. Chairman, for House Education, January 17th, 2025, Representative Bratton,
Here.
Representative Erickson, Representative Guggenmoss,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Lawley,
Here.
Representative Singh,
Excused.
Representative Strock,
Here.
Representative Williams,
Here.
Chairman Andrew.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Let's see. All right, House Bill 18 is now on the table for consideration, and Vice Chair Lawley will present the bill for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 18 was a bill we worked on during the interim. So it's a committee bill. And I don't want to speak broadly to the bill and then we'll walk through it together. We are trying to still address in different ways the CTE issue of, especially in smaller districts. So what this bill does is it actually goes in and makes some modifications in the model about how we do CTEs, and I'll walk through how in the bill, but it's really, again, directed to smaller schools that may have one or two CTE teachers, and again, needing more money for equipment and things like that. And so we put in, there's the model, if you will, and then there's another number that's higher, and they get to have whichever's greater. So it really is aimed at a pretty small target. But again, it was just part of the way we're trying to chip away and address a complex issue as it concerns CTE and having resources available for programs that students and parents want to see in our schools. And so that's what House Bill 18 is to address. So that might help you have that background, I think, as we walk through it. So again, House Bill 18 on page 1 in the enacting clause, it says that an act related to school finance modifying the career and technical education equipment and supplies component. So it's just for equipment and supplies. It does not deal with additional employees, although employees, FTEs, are part of the calculation. But this is for equipment and supplies. So it goes into the model and it makes some adjustments, and then there is an appropriation on the bill that we'll see in a minute, and that appropriation is to cover the first year. And then as we get in, the idea, and it says in the bill, the intent of the legislature is that would become a permanent part of the budget for the grant block model. So how do we do that? How we accomplish that is we came in, and you'll see some changes that are really just kind of cleanups, really statutory, almost like revisers. So you see here an adjustment on page 2, line 3 through 4, to the reference of where this attachment A is found in our books, which in this case is the session laws, which are the white books, not the green books, if you are into color coding. And so we then, you see on page 3, where we first of all begin to kind of update some language. We used to always call this vocational education. So some of our statutes still have it. So as we're doing this, we are sort of cleaning that up and referring to it as we now refer to it, which is career and technical education. And that's on page 3. Then you get over to the bottom of page 4, where we really make the change in terms of how we're adjusting the model. So you see on line 20 on page 4, first of all, again, a change of career and technical education, and career and technical education, again, that wording. And then on the top of page 5, we get to the meat of it, that we are basically, under the model, they would get, as you see the formula there, times $9,428.77 per FTE. That's why the FTE becomes important. It's a multiplier. And we leave that in there, but we add the words before it, the greater of that calculation I just gave you, career and technical education teacher, or $18,857.57 for equipment and supplies. So we recognize the model that already exists, but we provide a larger number so that the greater number can be used by smaller schools who don't meet the FTE requirements, or the FTE requirements don't net the money. And it's just a way of adding a little bit to help those smaller districts. So kind of a creative way to go in and do that in the model. And again, the appropriation is for $350,000 for the Public School Foundation for this adjustment in the model for CTE for their equipment and supplies. Mr. Chairman, I stand for any questions. And if I can't answer them, you can, right?
I'll try. Are there any questions for Vice Chair Lawley?
right.
Seeing none, do we have any comment from other elected officials or legislators? Would the Department of Education like to speak to the bill? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the House of Education. My name is Wanda Maloney, and I serve for the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Megan Degenfelder, at the Department of Education. She is in support of House Bill 18 and has outlined in her strategic plan the importance of preparing our students for jobs and careers through career and technical education. This bill would further support our students in small schools with having additional resources. We also want to thank the work that the interim committee did to bring this bill forward. I want to just talk a little bit. Representative Lawley spoke about state funding, and I really want to just break that down a little bit more for you. So in terms of the state model, it really provides for two things. There's two components. The model generates one additional CTE teacher for every 21 students. So we get that amount by looking at the number of full-time students that are enrolled in CTE classes, and that is multiplied times 29%. That gives us that calculation. And then again, for every 21 students, we do see an additional teacher that is applied to the funding. And this is only for grades 9 through 12. And then the model also provides an amount for CTE supplies and equipment, as Representative Lawley said, and that is also subject to the ECA adjustment. And so as you look at that number in the bill, that's about $9,000. And when we look at the ECA, when it's applied, that number would be about $14,184.68. And then if we double that amount, so if you're a school district that has fewer than 2, you would, as Representative Lawley said, be able to get that additional amount, and that would represent about $28,369. And again, that's due to the external cost adjustment that it's applied to that. So in looking at this, we believe the fiscal note identifies that there would be about 24 schools in 21 districts that would be impacted. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Are there any questions? No questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll now move on to public comment. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Boyd Brown, Wyoming Association of School Administrators, Executive Director. Again, just like the grants the other day, we do support this. It's a good way for our small schools to be able to get the supplies that they need. If you look at a program such as welding, which is very costly, with the metal and the rods and the gas and everything else that you need. If you're a small school, it's pretty difficult to get some of those, and this will help them out, especially if an FTE is coming in parts as well. So you could have 1.75 FTE because of the number of your students, and then the amount of money that they would get for sure would allow them to get the supplies that they need to continue with their career technical education programs. With that, I'll take questions.
Any questions? No. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jessie Defoe with the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education. First, just want to thank you again for the work during the interim to focus on this important issue and to just look at, Master Representative, we appreciate your walking through the explanation. We see that larger districts can receive anywhere from $275,000 to $500,000 in funds. So when you think about that comparatively to what a large district is able to accomplish compared to the small districts, this gives them the fighting chance to have the modern equipment that they need to adequately train our workforce. And so we appreciate you looking at this. We feel that the work done during the interim really shed light on the need for smaller school districts to have this, and we're grateful for your time to look at it. Whether you're looking at the industrial oven, the welding equipment, it costs the same in Level as it does in Cheyenne. And so we're just hoping that each school would have the same chance at that type of education. So with that, I'll just stand for any questions.
Question.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name's Erin Taylor. Nice to see a few of you already for the second time today. Representing the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees, like House Bill 17, we do offer our support for House Bill 18 for similar reasons, and especially when I travel around the state and I hear about wait lists for some of these courses and whatnot, maybe this could help with that. So the continuum of CTE and the work that we all do to support our workforce, that's why I'm here today. So appreciate your support for this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. Glad to be back in front of you. I think I emphasized how important finding talented workforce and skilled workforce is to the businesses of Wyoming last time I was here. So just thank you so much for the support on that bill. We really urge you to support this bill too. Career technical education is so valuable to businesses. I know of a business out of the Bighorn Basin, and the connection that they have to their high school CTE program is really valuable to them as they employ a lot of people. And so this is kind of one of those examples where I think you can help communities that really do have some great businesses growing and help them out. And this is a really great moment in time. I think the College of Education at the University of Wyoming is really supportive of CTE in a way that I think is particularly beneficial. So just appreciate what you are looking at, because I think this is an exciting moment for our ability to really help the CTE programs in our schools get going to a whole nother level. They're good now, but we can get, I think, to another plane.
Questions? All right, thank you. All right, good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, I guess it is. I am Pat Joyce. I'm the Assistant Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. And we have a very serious interest in the CTE graduates. We hire a lot of them. I represent 32 operating mines in the state right now, 5 on the way. So we have growth coming. But within that, we also have the career Mining Associates of Wyoming, and those are all of our supply and service companies, and they hire CTE students as well. So we're looking at 25 to 26,000 employees across the state that this roundabout way affects all of our hiring. I wear 2 other hats. I'm also on the board of directors for the Career and Industry Advisory Council for the Wyoming Career and Technical Advisory Council, and also on the board of directors for for Wyoming Skills USA. And when I hear this story peripherally all the time, that our smaller schools are having trouble getting supplies to prepare for competition at Skills USA, just to complete their coursework, et cetera. And so our industry supplies materials as much as we can. And of course, we're one of the larger taxpayers in the state, so we already contribute. But I would just like to say that we're glad to see this. We know that there's more needs available, but certainly support this bill and appreciate that you would too. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members. My name is Patricia McCoy. I'm the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty of Laramie County, and I'm here on behalf of all of our chapters in the state. We do support this bill because it updates outdated vocational terminology to career and technical education. It acknowledges that today's CTE programs are sophisticated and technology-driven, and it shows a commitment to treating CTE as a vital education pathway, not just vocational training. This bill provides clear, specific funding formulas, it establishes intent for continued funding in the future budgets, and it addresses some of the concerns and issues that were brought about for House Bill 17. We did have one concern with this bill, that the $350,000 of appropriation would not be enough funding, because for context, a single well-equipped CTE program could easily require this much funding for a major equipment update and full grant access. So to hear Representative Lawley speak of how this will help the smaller school districts, that's where our concern came in, was are these smaller school districts going to get fair access to these funds where they truly need it? We would like to offer what we feel may or may not be a realistic approach, which might include tiered funding based on program type and equipment intensity, separate allocations for maintenance versus new equipment, regular inflation adjustments, and additional funding for high-cost program areas, as well as an emergency fund for major repairs and replacements. We all have discussed how expensive those items can be, so we feel the emergency fund would be very beneficial. We thank you for your time and consideration on this bill and all the work that you guys put in the interim for it.
All right, thank you. Ashley, do we have anybody online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, public comment is now closed. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Vice Chair Lawley, seconded by Representative Guggenmoss. All right, are there any amendments? Any discussion on the bill? Question having been called, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 18, Career Technical Education Funding, do pass. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Aye.
Representative Singh is excused. Representative Strock?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
8 aye, 1 excused.
The bill has passed the committee. House Bill number 46 is now on the table for consideration. Representative Strock.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I'm Representative Strock from House District 6, and I'm here to present House Bill 46, the Homeschool Freedom Act. So currently under Wyoming law, homeschool parents are required to submit their curriculum to their local school board for approval, and this bill repeals that requirement. This bill would give parents the right to educate their children at home without government overreach. And 11 states have never required this kind of notification, including Idaho, Texas, Illinois, Michigan, Iowa, and Missouri. So what to me is kind of exciting, Wyoming would be joining them. And importantly, this bill would not change the way homeschool children participate in public school sports and activities, as Wyoming law already protects access of homeschoolers to these activities in 21-4-506. And so, anyway, I don't know if we wanted to walk through it or real quick. It's really quite simple, so just on that first page. And it's an act relating to education. It's just removing the requirement that home-based educational programs submit curriculum to the local school board, and removing a provision relating to the failure to submit curriculum and providing for an effective date. So pretty much it just, right at the end, takes it all out, and it's effective in July 1st, 2025. So any questions?
Any questions for Representative Strzok? No questions, thank you. And are there any state agencies that would like to comment on this bill? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Dickie Shaner speaking on behalf of State Superintendent Megan Degenfelder. She is in support of this bill. And I would note too that I talked to some of my colleagues from Department of Family Services who may be asking for an amendment to deal with the situation they have, and I think we'd certainly support that effort as well.
Any questions? Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Corin Schmidt. I'm the Director of the Wyoming Department of Family Services, and I have with me my two colleagues, Sarah Sarelson and Christy Gordy, who are responsible for social services. To begin, we really don't have an opinion on this bill other than just to highlight a little bit of a complication it creates for us as we are tasked with investigating educational neglect. So under the current neglect statutes, which includes education, and this really kind of connects to the absenteeism, the willful absenteeism, which is found in statute, and I can give you the citation, 21-4-101, Romanet 7. And what that says is oftentimes we will get calls from neighbors, from schools, indicating some kind of concern that a family isn't meeting their obligation for compulsory education. And sometimes that means a letter to the county attorney's office because of a certain number of absences. And they will ask us or make a report on educational neglect, and then we have to investigate that. When we investigate that, we will go talk to the family, the parents. We will tell them that that's been a report that's been made. And one of the ways that we can verify for homeschooling is that that is reported to the district, and then the district checks the curriculum or has available the curriculum. Without having some sort of way for us to verify that the homeschooling is in fact meeting the requirements of compulsory education, it will be very difficult for us to make a determination of educational neglect. This is a small problem. We encounter about 50 educational neglect allegations a year. We find that 50% of the time or so, the allegation is correct. It's been substantiated, or we found educational neglect. And then we will work with the family in terms of trying to identify what barriers there are to getting their children to school, et cetera. So we do have, unfortunately, some situations where families really do not want to take their children to school for whatever reason, say they're homeschooling as a result, and then we have no way to know if legitimately that is what they're doing, or if it's just a way to be able to avoid any further intervention. What we would propose is just some consideration that would allow the schools to verify the curriculum if requested. We have authority under the current statute to be able to investigate these cases. So this is just something that may make that a little bit more complicated, and we just ask for your consideration.
All right, are there any? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question. When you go, are called in as DFS and you go to investigate one of these reportings, can you ask the family, or have you thought about asking the family themselves? We report their concern that you aren't, schooling your children, and just ask what kind of curriculum that you have to verify that you are homeschooling, your children. Could you comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bratton, yes, we could, but we don't have the expertise to make a determination if that curriculum is sound. I mean, it would just be our caseworker at their best guess saying yes or no. We could potentially take that curriculum, whatever it is, take it to a school and ask for their opinion. That puts the school in a difficult situation as well under the proposed statute. So yes, we could. Would we be good determiners of a quality curriculum? Probably not.
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple of questions. When you said there were 50, was that in the whole state? Okay, thank you. And then another question that I have, how many of the 50 cases you mentioned resulted directly from the curriculum requirement? Is it?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Strzok, it's a combination of factors that we look at that is one that then helps us to understand, is this truly a legitimate homeschooling environment? It's not the only thing we look at. We're going to ask permission from the parent to be able to contact the school and have a conversation with them. And then we will look at other cooperative information, interviews with other people, et cetera, that might help us make that indication. This just makes it pretty clear cut for the family and for us.
And
Follow-up?
yes, a follow-up, I do. And can you tell me what percentage of these reports are actually homeschooled, not just reports that have come in? How many are actually homeschooled reports?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Strzok, no, I can't tell you that.
Okay,
We
thank
don't
you.
we don't collect that level of data.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little unclear on one aspect of this. I understand what your concern is. But if currently there's the claim that there are people who claim to homeschool and are not, if they have submitted curriculum to the local school board, how do they come up on your radar? And why wouldn't they still be able to come up on your radar the same way if they do not give their curriculum to a school board?
Dr. Schmidt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, these are calls for children that are assumed to be going to public school. When we get an allegation of educational neglect, we will go to that family, and it's at that time they can say, we homeschool. Okay. And then we say, fine, we check with the school, everything is fine. So it won't necessarily come to our attention because they're homeschooled and we're wondering about their curriculum. It's when there's absences usually.
Follow-up? No. Any more questions? Oh, Representative Lawley.
Do you have, can you give a more detail? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. About what your conceptual amendment would be like what would meet your need? It seems to me the first thing you would want to check, Director Schmidt, is whether or not the school is counting them in their ADM count. They're basically, I know their absenteeism is the issue, but they consider them to be in the public school system. So, and being treated as so by the system. So, I mean, I'm trying to understand how you would solve this dilemma that you have.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, for example, let's say that it's a neighbor and they notice all of a sudden that the kids aren't going to school. And they call us and say, these children aren't attending school. We think that there's educational neglect. What they're going to say is there's absenteeism. And they may be younger children, so it's a little bit more noticeable. So we will get that report and we will go talk to the family And it's at that point they say, we homeschool, and we say, okay, that makes sense. We don't need to know anything further. We will ask, well, that's not entirely true. They say they're homeschooling, we get a consent from them to contact the school, we verify that with the school. And then at that point, there's no reason to go any further. However, if they say, we homeschool, we don't necessarily need to share anything with the school, and we just take for granted then that when they declare that they're homeschooling, that they're providing all of the educational requirements, whatever those are. We say, okay, but do we really know that's okay? So we can verify with the school and say, are they being homeschooled? Have they declared that? And the school can say yes, but we still don't have any way to verify whether that child is getting compulsory education. It's a circle, and I don't know if I have a good solution other than maybe to suggest that if there is some allegation of educational neglect, that we can request a verification of the curriculum. Otherwise, we wouldn't be involved.
Follow-up? Representative Lawley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It kind of goes back to Representative Kelly's question. I'm not sure I see the nexus between curriculum information given to the districts, which they may or may not even review, to your dilemma of how do you determine if there's this neglect. It seems to me the educational neglect goes towards the public education system. So if they're not in the public education system, I'm reading the statute right here, and it seems to be connected with public school attendance. And so it doesn't give any authority, as I read it, to that sort of authority over the homeschool environment. So I'm kind of trying to have a hard time. I see what you're getting at, but I don't find you have the authority under this provision to do it unless they are really truant from public school, and then that's an issue to work with the public school.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, if a child is declared to be homeschooled and is not going to public school, we would not consider that educational neglect. The concern we have is if there is a problem at home, children aren't going to school, we start to investigate. They say then, oh no, we're homeschooling, we're going to contact the school. Is there, and then that is the way then that they choose, that they're using it as an out is what I'm concerned about. That maybe that they're using homeschooling as a reason not to participate in the public education system, but are we sure that they're legitimately interested in homeschooling their children? It is a hard place for the department, I'm going to admit, is one of the toughest places and cases that we investigate, because we are to some extent acting as an agent of the school when we're saying there's a statute that says there's a certain number of days that you can be absent. If you're absent that many days, then there can be contact with the county attorneys, and then that may require us then to investigate. The verification is just a tool for us. If it's not there, we will still have to continue to investigate those cases. It's not going to change our statutory requirement.
Yeah.
This is just a part of it that would make it easier, that if it's a homeschooling, we could step right out.
Thank you.
All right, I think we probably should wrap up. Is there any other questions we need? All right, thank you. Are there any legislators in the room who would like to offer testimony on this bill? Seeing none, we'll open public comment in the interest. Oh, all right. Representative Lean, if you could please, you can stay there. If you keep your comments to 3 minutes, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I apologize, I was not paying attention. I sit before you today in affirmation of this legislation. I think that it is a good balance for those that want to homeschool and those that already homeschool. I can tell you as a homeschooling parent that over the last 20 years, we've had the opportunity to take our children to many events. And sometimes it may not look like we're schooling our children because they may be on recess for an hour. I tell you that educational neglect is a real concern, but that a lot of times there are differences within the homeschools. And the difference between homeschool and public education is that it's the parent's choice. And that is the most important part of this legislation. We really want to make sure that what the parent is choosing for their curriculum fits their students best, and that means that the parent makes the ultimate authority. By only having to register one time with the state, it would give us the state the opportunity to know that that child exists, but it strikes a balance in personal freedoms that you're able to educate your children at home in the way that you best see fit. And so I sit before you today in support of this legislation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too rise in support of this bill. I have a lot of people in my district that are homeschoolers, and I've had a lot of emails encouraging me to support it, and I would urge your support. So thank you. I'd stand for any questions if you may have them.
All right, thank you. Oh, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for either one of you, just for clarification. And this, the last point that Representative Strzok made was this bill would not change in any way homeschool children participate in the activities that you mentioned. And so I'd just like for clarification, you'd be familiar with the statute 214506, that is that makes participation in activities by students allowed that are not enrolled in the district. And number 3 under that, as I read it, says, as a condition of participation, the student shall be required to comply with all other rules and policies of the district or any school activities association applicable to all students participating in the activity. And so I was just wondering, what's the present practice to ensure that a homeschool student is complying with the rules and policies? And would this legislation, would it change that or make it harder for a district to be able to confirm that, for instance, a child is eligible for sport, to participate in public sports?
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Williams, currently, all I have to do is put on my scope and sequence that I am using Natrona County Services and that my child can then participate in woodshop, welding, and any of the arts, any of the classes that they offer, as well as to participate in the sports that Natrona County has to offer. This happens at all age levels, and we have had great success with that in Natrona County. So this does not infringe on our ability to do that, because when the one time you register your student, as long as you put on there that you're willing to, if you want to use the services within that school district, you put that school district as a part of your education curriculum, that very first time it should cover it.
Follow up.
Please.
Representative Williams.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
yes.
also respond to Representative Williams' question. I'm very proud of what happened in my county, because we had a situation arise where Uintah County School District Number 1 said that they would not allow homeschooled students to attend homecoming. And it got a little bit dicey. Obviously people were concerned, but I'm proud of the fact that my community was able to come together. They were able to resolve the differences, and eventually those students that were homeschooled were allowed to attend. And I think it's just, they wanted clarity that nobody's gonna come and be disruptive, at those events. And so I think it's important that you maintain that. The kids understand they gotta play by the rules, whether it's sports, whether it's any other activity. They are obligated to follow the rules of the local school districts. And I think that's an important thing not to be lost.
Follow up.
Representative Williams.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. That helps a lot. In particular, if you think about being eligible for school sports and you have to maintain a particular grade level, how is that handled now for a homeschool student to be eligible?
Who wants Representative Lean?
Mr. Chairman, as a homeschool mom, I have coaches reach out to me very often and they ask, has my child completed all of his work? What are his grade levels? And because I, as a parent, choose to track all of that, I can send them a report card. There are other instances where they just reach out to the parents and the parents can confirm or deny that the child is on top of their education.
Thank you.
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of a follow-up on the requirements. The requirements are really for that physical in sports. That's one of the requirements that there actually is part of that when they say requirements. So you've got the physicals for sports, and that doesn't change any of this on what we're asking. And also the grade requirement, this is really just about curriculum. It hasn't anything to do with, this is what this bill is really talking about, is our curriculum and what we need to do. So, thank you.
Representative Williams. All right, thank you. And we'll now move to public testimony. And in the interest of getting to all of our bills today, we'd like to take 15 minutes of public comment against the bill first and then 15 minutes for. So if you're speaking against the bill, please move to the front.
Tate, I'll let you go because I'm not really against the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. Not in opposition, but I did want to put something on your radar for consideration. The submission of curriculum, we know that our students aren't always static in where they're receiving their education. Sometimes parents decide that they want to homeschool them, and then at times they'll make that decision for whatever reason to put their child back into a public school or a charter school. That submission of curriculum just ensures when that child comes back to a public education system that the remedial action isn't an undue burden on our educators. So something for your consideration.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Again, I've been the superintendent in 3 different districts in Wyoming, the largest and the smallest included in that. Again, not against the bill, just want to make sure that you understand that we are required to have a free and appropriate education for all of our students out there. Again, I want to echo where the health department was a little bit, that it's still important, I believe, for the school district to know that a student is homeschooled. So a letter to the school district or some way of making sure that we know that they're there so we don't get into that situation is all that I would want to make sure that we continue to do for the school district so that they don't send somebody when it shouldn't happen. There are some pretty stiff statutes out there for a student being truant and what we have to do and when we have to turn them into the county attorney. So again, just that we are notified that a student is going to be homeschooled so that we don't do that. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Williams.
If I have, thank you, Chairman. If I have a student that I homeschool for, say, his elementary years, and I'm not the best homeschooler, and I haven't submitted that curriculum to the school, and when I bring him back to public school because it no longer fits our family, and he's 2 or 3 years behind, tell me what that looks like from your perspective, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, that looks different in different districts. Frequently, districts will do an assessment and talk to the parents about, we feel like they're behind here, and talk about where that appropriate placement for that student might be. Other districts might just put them into the grade that the parents say that they were homeschooled to. So it really is a little bit district by district, and then we try to scaffold those students if they're behind. Frequently, we have homeschool kids they're great. In one of my districts, we had students that participated in everything. They would come and take physics classes because parents sometimes didn't have the expertise and we didn't have the online stuff at that time. So I think it's just like anything else. We have a range out there, and I would applaud a lot of our homeschoolers for what they do and how those kids turn out. So I think it's going to depend on the student and where they're at. Again, we try to take the students from wherever they're at. It wouldn't be any different than getting a student from out of state that does not have as high requirements and standards as Wyoming, and trying to scaffold those students up. So we take every kid that we get and we do the best that we can with them.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Representative Bratton.
Do you do the same thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you do the same with kids if they come in from homeschool or another situation, another state, and they are far ahead? Then you place them, try to place them appropriately along with the parent if they're a year or two ahead because they've been in homeschool environment?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown.
Representative Bratton, yes, that can happen as well. Anytime that we do those, wind up with a new kid, we try to do whatever is appropriate for them.
All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Clark Fairbanks, I'm the Director of the Wyoming Youth Service Association. And like several before me, I'm not necessarily speaking in opposition to this bill, but I do have some concerns that I'd like you to consider as it relates to unintended consequences. I spent 30-plus years of my career working with high-need, vulnerable youth and families who struggled. So that's my perspective. Youth were often placed, sometimes court-ordered, into treatment. And here's what my concern is when I look at homeschooling, I think everyone would agree a majority of the people do it incredibly well. I think a majority of people understand the intense responsibility that comes with homeschooling your child and the amount of work that it requires for a family. But there are some that don't, and that's where my concern lies. My experience, I worked with youth, some who attended public school, so just being transparent, some who attended public school, some who were homeschooled, who came in as a 16, 17-year-old with 1 or 2 or 4 credit hours, and that's all. So significantly behind in their academics. My question isn't what curriculum. My question that I ask you to consider is for the families who are struggling with a kid who doesn't want to go to school, who doesn't want and is compelled to go to school because of their age, and the family says, and the kid says, well, just homeschool me, and the parent says, yeah, okay, without doing the research, without understanding fully the responsibility, what is in place to help compel the family to understand the immense responsibility. And really my concern then just goes to the tragedy of somebody who may then drop out with no education. And it's rare. I just want to acknowledge that. But my concern in working with, in my experience, we would educate approximately 100 kids a year in an alternative or in institutional education. And we would have probably 15 of those youth who may come in multiple years behind in their education. And so what I think of is to trust, but also verify. And my question to you would be, what would be there to just, I understand I believe you're trying to make this easier for the families who are doing an incredible job. But my question would be, what verification do you have for the family who may be defaulting, using this as a default because they're tired of the fight? with their child. And so that lies my question. And so I guess what I would ask is to consider what would be the verify part of this. And I would stand for any questions.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo some of the same concerns that you have and have worked with similar populations in my lifetime. Forgive me for answering a question with a question, but you happen to be the one on the hot seat when this hit me. How does submission of a curriculum to a school board ensure the parents are actually teaching that anyway? Consider the fact that you can go online and instantly get a curriculum. You can have AI generate one for you on the fly, send it to a school board, and then do nothing at home. What's the verification system or method of enforcement we have for the current statute? I don't see it. So I don't see the harm in removing that requirement, which just starts to look like an extra burden on both the school board and the parents with no real upside.
Mr. Chairman?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Representative Kelly, I think that raises a very good question, and I anticipated that question. I believe that there are a lot of resources out there for homeschooling, and I'm not an expert on this. But when I think of that, my point being that it requires a parent to think through the process and research and obtain outside assistance. It could be AI generated. It could be a community of homeschoolers that would assist me in identifying that. And I think just in that, so my point initially was my issue isn't what curriculum, it's a curriculum. So again, my experience, sometimes you have parents who just say, all right, I'm done. We'll homeschool you. We'll say we're homeschooling you. And this is a minority, but it would require them to go through those steps to find it and submit it. And that in itself, I thought of the analogy. It's like if you're going to work from home. We've seen a lot of that lately. As an employer, my point was we were forced into that, and there was a component of trust but verify. And people do it incredibly well. But there's a verification part. So it might be different than curriculum. I would recognize that, but something to verify.
Follow up. Representative Guggenmoss.
Here. Do we find the same problem in our public school system as far as the curriculum? Because I have noticed in my district how the curriculum that is chosen is not effective. They'll actually switch curriculums at a certain grade, switch curriculums on the kids. And then I saw their grades just start tanking. So it's like, even though the public school has these standards, are there cases where those standards are not effective either?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to answer that. I think that's a complicated question. In answering that, having had to ensure curriculum, you're right. I think there are different styles of learning. There are kids in public school who struggle. And I thought what you were going to ask is, are there kids in public school who also are deficient in credits? And absolutely, there are. I think, again, the curriculum wasn't my point as much as in the public school setting, if someone isn't attending and isn't participating, depending on their age, there are processes for bringing that to attention and interventions then that are taken. And again, in my experience, there were times that those were not in place for some homeschool students.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody else? Was there anybody else who would like to speak against the bill? Is there anybody who'd like to speak for the bill? Good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing my testimony, Chairman Andrew and honorable representatives. My name is Brenna Lowry. I'm from Cheyenne, Wyoming. I've had personal experience with the letter of intent as I home educated 5 of my children to graduation here in this state. So I'm intimately involved with the process. Did it every year. It was not necessarily cumbersome, not necessarily any big deal, but it is a process without an outcome. It is in a sense, a hoop to jump through with no, I want to say a statute without a, what did I call it? A statute without a reason, or, there's really no point behind having to report this. And I've heard the testimonies of people before. There are the outliers. I get that. My 5 children range from a PhD to a mechanic. They're all thriving and functioning in Wyoming. I don't think my reporting of the curriculum had any bearing on their success or my ability as a teacher. After this, I've been serving for 3 years for the as president of Homeschool Wyoming, and what I've seen, since 2020 is the vast increase in homeschoolers in response to COVID, and since then, just the dramatic increase in homeschooling. New to Wyoming homeschoolers are completely confused by this requirement, and this causes a lot of consternation, sometimes even fear, as they get their letters back with a little bit of aggressive language that the maybe not aggressive, but overreach in a sense, that the schools approve their curriculum. And the statute, as I read it, they don't have any ability to approve. We just submit our letter of intent. There's no approval necessary. This is sort of just a non-issue, sort of, but I'd like to bring it up, that homeschooling also, because of freedom issues, we can start and stop our school year at any time. The school district, however, requires us or implores us to put in our letter of intent in July or August of each year. I know homeschoolers who homeschool all year round. They take 6 weeks on, 1 week off. I know homeschoolers who start in maybe July, go through till, not in sequence with necessarily with the public school. So there's some of that isn't congruent with homeschooling. It's not a huge deal, but it was kind of interesting as I was thinking through the reasons for this. Wyoming has the value of freedom, and I don't think this piece of this statute reflects our value of freedom in education, and especially for homeschoolers. As Representative Strzok pointed out, we are behind 11 other states who have never required a letter of intent. And so it would be wonderful if you all would support this and we could be the 12th state. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Are
stand for
there any
comment.
questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand if you don't wish to answer this question, so if you politely decline, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
As a mother, could you tell us what it feels like to report to a government entity what you teach your children at home?
Ms. Lowry.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Kelly. I've heard the phrase recently, I don't co-parent with the government. It feels like I co-teach with the government, if I'm doing that right. I honestly just complied. I did the thing, but in my freedom-minded values, and as I've served as president of Homeschool Wyoming, it's come to me to see these poor people kind of struggle in fear of what the government is going to come back on them with. And I know maybe that's not the intent of the statute, but the amount of fear and confusion And especially, as I say, they received their letters back with approval, and the idea that they can be approved or disapproved was kind of a bigger issue. So, no, I don't think that should be an issue. I think it goes into parents' rights to educate and to raise our children as we see fit. And we do have a statute relating to parents' rights in Wyoming, thankfully.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, my name is Dr. Douglas Petersma. I am a practitioner of home education here in Laramie County, as well as an education services provider for other homeschooling families, and an independent education researcher with a focus on home education. I'm speaking today in support of House Bill 46 for a number of reasons, but I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization with which I am affiliated. Like most who consider themselves conservatives, I am a proponent of smaller government, reducing bureaucratic inefficiencies, and eliminating pointless red tape. This requirement for home educating families to submit paperwork annually to a local school district, which cannot legally be approved or disapproved, but only acknowledged, is the epitome of pointless. It represents a stereotypical inefficiency of government operation that exists only because it has existed and continues to exist on the faulty presumption that it should continue to exist for that reason alone. Not only does this requirement not do anything with it, it carries with it a faulty assumption that if parents were not required to do it, then they would not see to the education of their children. By way of my personal example, I submitted paperwork faithfully for my two children who were homeschooled up until the point where they reached the compulsory age of 18, after which I no longer submitted the paperwork, and yet I still continued to educate my children, one through graduation in 2022 and the other one who is projected to graduate this year. Over the last 100+ years in our nation, many have come to see the state as the sole or primary provider of education to this nation's children, and home educating families are turning that paradigm on its head with great success. I could cite statistics about academic performance of homeschool students, which is not the point of this, or research that points to their successful social outcomes, again, which is not the point. But the bottom line can be captured in a quote by R.J. Rushdoony written in the context of education that states, "To assume the right and need of the state to provide for its citizens is to assume the basic incompetence of man." The state has assumed not only that it must provide for the education of citizens, but that the absence of a compulsion to do so would result in no education at all. The existing requirement is evidence of that assumption. According to an Ohio State Supreme Court decision in the case Ohio v. Wisner, it has long been recognized that the right of a parent to guide the education of his or her children is indeed a fundamental right. I ask the committee and the whole legislative body to affirm that fundamental right by removing this useless requirement, which only consumes time for both the home educating families and for the district staff for no discernible purpose or positive impact on educational outcomes. If I may briefly address just some of the comments that have been mentioned before, specifically to DFS and their requirement to investigate educational neglect. I totally understand that as a requirement that they have, but when the numbers were thrown out, 50 cases in the state, 50% of which are related to homeschooling, an unknown percentage of those that are related, or the 50% were related to curriculum, and an unknown number of those related to homeschooling. I would say before the committee makes any kind of a decision related to that testimony, to put it in the perspective of the total number of homeschoolers, which I don't have that number right in front of me, but I know the number of families is many, many hundreds, and I know the number of students is probably in the thousands. But before we could act on outlier situations, which sometimes are very sad situations, I acknowledge, I would ask that we put that into its proper perspective of the total number of individuals who are homeschooling and the burden on the homeschoolers and the districts to track that data, to collate that data, wherein if there was a particular case they needed to look at, they could certainly do that within the existing paradigms that they have and not necessarily be a burden to the homeschool population as a whole. Thank you very much for hearing my testimony, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. Please go ahead and state your name and where you're from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Carl Allred. I'm from Uintah County. And we have quite a few homeschoolers out in that area. And I've got one comment one of the families asked me to read to you guys since she couldn't be here. And she said, this is from her. It says, "You, as the legislature, have a constitutional requirement to provide public education. But we, as the citizens, do not have any obligation to participate in that system. Most homeschoolers do not want or need your oversight. So, but in support of this bill, you know, as I look, like I said, we have a lot of homeschoolers out there. And we've got at least 3 organizations in our county of homeschoolers. They get together, they collaborate, they do things like that. In fact, this last year, one of my sons decided they're homeschooling their kids now. And as I talk to people around the state, there, as was mentioned, sometimes there's a lot of apprehension and fear. You know, what is this letter supposed to look like? And some of them, those districts where they have had quite a few pull out and do homeschooling, they've kind of accepted the fact that I got to tell you a curriculum, but I don't have to tell you what brand I'm doing, what textbooks I'm using, any of that. I just say, okay, this year we're going to study science and English, some grammar, some history, and that's all I got to tell you. Again, the statute, and as has been mentioned, there's no approval for it. I just let you know, this is what we're going to teach this year. But there are some of the districts here where people have had a lot of hit back, and they say, well, no, we want to know exactly what you're teaching. Well, that's not your right. You don't get to know that. And, you know, I'll tell you, homeschooling is a great opportunity. One of the families that, girls that was homeschooled in our county there, her claim to fame is she says that when she took the GED here in Wyoming, she got the highest score ever in the history and still holds that record. You know, you look at a lot of different studies. In elementary school, homeschoolers in 1 hour cover more than what the public school does in the entire day. Get into middle school about 1.5 hours, high school about 2 hours. And they cover more. And there's also studies, these elementary school kids, they have a attention span of like less than 45 minutes. But yeah, we're going to sit them in a classroom for all day long. So what's the problem? Oh, they got ADHD and let's drug them. But they are getting better education. But it's not the school district's point. I mean, some of them are upset because if you homeschool, then they lose money. So, like I said, a lot of the school districts have understood what it is and what they have to do. But it's just better off to just get rid of that. And when you talk about the comments from the state, when they say, oh, well, if we get a complaint from a neighbor who can't mind their own business and tells you that your kids are at home, it's very simple. You go to the school and you say, is this child truant? Well, they're not in our school system. That's the end of it. We're done. We don't need to go investigate. Did they turn in a curriculum? Are they doing this? If the school tells you they're homeschooled, they're homeschooled. So you don't have to do that much of, you don't have to contact the family even. That's a simple answer. Anyway, I would ask that you guys support this bill. I think it's good for the homeschoolers, and that's something that they're looking for. And again, this oversight that's in statute right now, it serves no purpose. Thank you.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. You talked about some districts have hit back, which means they come back and say, hey, I didn't like what you put in on the report. Can you give me more? What do you mean by some? Because you mentioned most never bother, or they're not required to do it, but what is some?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Erickson, thanks for the question. Like I say, for those of you that know me, I'm involved all across the state, and so I talk to a lot of people and things, and we have had some reports where people want to homeschool and they say, well, what am I supposed to turn in to these guys? I turn this in and the district comes back. That's not good enough. We're not going to approve it. Well, again, like has been mentioned, there is no approval. I just got to tell you what I'm going to do. But as I said, if you pull a kid out and you homeschool them, that school district loses money. So if all of a sudden they start seeing a big uptick, you know, and oh, heck, they lost 400 students to homeschooling over a couple of years there. some of these, their intent is to not let you homeschool and do everything I can to keep you from doing that and keep you in the public education system. So they'll come back and they'll say, this isn't good enough that you turned into us, and we want to know more. And so, like I said, and some of the others have said, there's some apprehension sometimes on that. Thankfully, most of the districts here in the state, we've gotten past that. But there still are a few that are really against the homeschooling.
All right, thank you. We are out of time for public comment. I'm sorry. All right, committee. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by all of us and moved by Representative Erickson and seconded by Representative Guggenmoss. Are there any amendments? No amendments. Any discussion on this bill? Question having been called. No, we need to call the roll. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 46, Homeschool Freedom Act, do pass. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
No.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Aye.
Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strzok?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
8 aye, 1 no.
All right, the bill has passed the committee. House Bill, which one is 129, is now on the table for consideration. Representative Larson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear this bill. It's a pretty short, simple little bill, and hopefully we can keep it that way for the rest of the meeting so we can get back upstairs. So I'll just be brief and just go through the bill. You'll see there on page 1 under section 1, this strikes out a payment on June 20th or the last business day immediately preceding June 20th of the year. My understanding was this specific language was put in there a few years back when we did an ad valorem change, and so it's no longer needed now that we're into the latter years of the ad valorem change. So that was my understanding. I think that there's going to be a few people come up and talk about it. One of the concerns I know that's going to come up is the districts don't necessarily want to receive the money because it affects some of the model and some of the things that they're doing. So I'm not an expert on that side of things, so I'll let them explain their concerns, but I don't think they're opposed to the bill from what I understand. They just want to bring up some topics there. I also do have Sweetwater County Treasurer on the line, Mark Cowan, and he'll have some input as well to the bill, but I'll just stand it for any questions at this point.
Any questions for Representative Larson? All right, thank you. Would the Department of Education like to speak to this bill? All right, let's take public comment. Maybe we'll go online first. Ashley, sorry, I should have sent you a text, but just so we can get the explanation from the county as well.
Problem, Mr. Chairman. I will bring Mark Cowan into the room.
All right, please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mark Cowan, Sweetwater County Treasurer. Pleasure to join you today.
Thank you.
This bill is a simple bill. We do have a second payment that was introduced back in 2020 as part of the Senate File 60, where we moved to monthly mineral tax payments. So we're going to eliminate that second payment. A lot of the districts do not want this second payment anyways. It actually is a little bit of work for them to clear that by the end of their fiscal year on June 30th. And it's a little bit of work for the counties too. There are a lot of counties that are having difficulty trying to get that payment out as they end their fiscal year. So it's just cleaning this up, getting rid of that second payment. Really shouldn't be any mystery to it.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Is there any other public comment? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Wyoming Association of School Administrators, and I've asked Jed Ciccarelli, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Mr. Ciccarelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jed Ciccarelli, Chief Financial Officer with Laramie County School District 1.
So, not in opposition to the bill, would like to see the opportunity to remove any deposits to the school from June 1st on from our reserve calculation. And what I would say there is it depends on whether you're a recapture district or an entitlement district, and some of you may want to know what that is, and I can answer that question if you want. But you may get a large amount of money, or you may not get very much money there, and it may bump up against your cap if you get that large amount, because the snapshot is June 30th there. So if we could, depending on what happens with the treasurers when they send the money, it would just be nice to be able to not count that money after June 1st into our cash reserve. And with that, I'm going to let Jed talk a little bit about how all that works, because he's one of our business managers in our districts, and was also part of the Department of Ed and over the funding model at that time. Go ahead, Jed.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of being brief, I'll just quickly mention that I've had the opportunity to chat with a number of my colleagues across the state, and it's a little bit hit or miss if the districts receive that final June payment at all. Those that do receive that final June payment have kind of figured out a way to navigate that. I would tell you that without getting overly technical, there's a true-up that happens between school districts at the end of the fiscal year and the Department of Education, specifically through an estimate of what we thought we would collect through ad valorem taxes, which has candidly been a difficult learning curve for all of us. By receiving that final June payment, it adds an additional layer of complexity to school districts in order to try to forecast or anticipate what that amount might be. In some cases, it can push a school district into a cash excess or some other similar adjustment on a tax shortage if they've overestimated what that payment would be. So, Mr. Chairman, in summary, I think there's some benefits. Speaking from firsthand experience, we've been surprised by some of those final payments in June, and it's caused some swings in what we estimated our funding might be.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to take you up on your offer to help me understand how this would be different for a recapture district.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, so recapture districts send money back to the state, and they get most of their taxes either in December or May and June. So they may wind up with quite a bit, especially in some of our, well, the recapture districts are all mineral wealthy districts usually. And so that makes it different. And then you, again, trying to square up with the Department of Ed about how much we estimated and how much we actually got is kind of a difficult deal. Entitlement districts get their taxes during the same time, but then the state sends them checks throughout the year to make up for the difference that they should be funded and what their local taxes bring. And I hope that helps answer that question.
Follow up? Oh, no. Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think I do understand the problem, but I'm not sure if I heard a way we could address it in this bill. Can you help me with that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I think by eliminating that additional end of month, end of June payment would help alleviate some of those volatilities in the tax excess and shortfall calculations just as they're currently drafted. To Dr. Brown's point, there's always a concern over how these resources received at the end of the school year may count against the school district's cash reserves limit, which is maybe a subject in and of itself, which would probably be a more involved and complex conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So have you talked to the entitlement districts? How do they feel about this?
I don't believe it's a problem for either one of them. Different districts, our reserves are used for cash flow. And currently we can have up to 30% of our guarantee, which is very nice at this point. We used to only be able to have 15%. But depending on whether you're a recapture district or an entitlement district, you run short on money at different times. And you need those reserves to be able to cash flow what you're doing. When I was in one of our recapture districts, we actually had to go out for tax anticipation warrants to meet payroll and do everything that we needed prior to the state allowing us to get a recapture loan at 0%. So, and we actually brought that bill forward. So it depends on the district and when they get money and where they have money on when they will run short on money. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. We'll open it up to we are on public comment. Anybody else? All right, committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Vice Chair Lawley, seconded by Representative Williams. Are there any amendments? Is there any discussion on the bill? Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 29, school finance, dates for fund transfers do pass. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Aye.
Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strzok?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
9-0.
Bill passes the committee, and that is all we have today. So thank you. We are adjourned.